everybody, and welcome back to another episode of 6 Degrees of Associations. We are here today with a special guest from the American Staffing Association, Haley Jones. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to see you.
You too.
And Lucas, good to see you as always.
Good to see you, Erin. Excited about our episode.
Yes, absolutely. So we got your name from Alexis Redmond, and she was saying that you are our DEI expert, also just a whiz bang at member engagement and so forth. But I'm looking forward to the topics that we'll discuss today. Before we get into that, though, maybe you could share with everyone what your role is at American Staffing Association and any kind of focus areas or other information that would help our audience get to know you better.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the director of member engagement at ASA. I've been there for about just over 3 years now. My focus is our DEI group called the Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Advocacy Group, but I also oversee our chapter program, our state networks, our sections, mentoring programs, all of our volunteer activities, pretty much any engagement program you can think of that is a benefit to our members is under my purview.
That's awesome. Well, as we mentioned, the DEI focus of yours, but you kind of had an interesting story about how you sort of took over that focus within the organization that you're in. I'm wondering if you might share with us, how did you get started? How has the focus grown? And what are you thinking about now?
Sure. So back in 2020, so initially my role was managing our state networks and chapters, and with the state networks especially, it was planning these small in-person networking events. And in 2020, for obvious reasons, we had to put all of that on pause. A lot of our members, our members work at staffing firms. Several of them are owners, especially within our volunteers, and they wanted to focus on keeping their businesses afloat, and they didn't necessarily have time to sit on council calls and figure out how we can keep things going as far as like in a virtual environment. So we put them on pause, which effectively changed my job because back when we all thought it was going to be 2 weeks, I couldn't have seen that we're only now resuming those in-person events in about a month. So when George Floyd's murder happened, we had, and I'll say the idea group was not on my team at all at that point. But when it happened, I got a lot of phone calls from some of my council volunteers asking where we were, what was ASA going to do about this, where's the idea group? And I couldn't answer them. And the person who had initially managed that group had retired. There was an interim person who was managing him in the meantime, but then, like I mentioned earlier, we put everything on pause. So nothing had happened since February. So because I had the bandwidth to take over, and quite frankly, the passion to do it at that point, because I kind of just felt like something needed to happen and something needed to be done, I volunteered to take it on and take it off. The person who was the interim truly didn't have the bandwidth for it, and I did. So we transitioned. It took us about 2 months, but we transitioned that group, and it officially became my responsibility in August of 2020. So in 2020, with no budget, there was a lot of favors asked to help us with programming to put out really what we thought needed to address immediate needs of our members. It was specifically around race and hiring, and so we put out a few programs, one including a virtual fireside chat with the National Urban League as a part of a partnership we had with them to really talk about what our members could do to help with what everyone felt back then that they wanted to do something, but they didn't know what. So our members could take practical actions to actually make a difference. So Urban League really led an awesome conversation to kind of help them and to sort of figure out their place and everything. So we focused a lot on race and bias in 2020. In 2021, we kind of expanded that to include disability employment, because with all of us still being home and working remotely, there were just so many, I think the opportunities have always been there. I think people just realize there are additional opportunities for people with disabilities to be able to work. And I work on an alliance team with the Office of Disability Employment Policies. So we actually worked all of last year to put together a disability employment microsite that we launched in February of this year to help our members and kind of make them realize, that there's more to hiring a person with disability it's not as, I guess, daunting as I think people think. We had someone from National Organization on Disability come and kind of bust a lot of myths that people have about that. And I think that's been one of the most beneficial parts of our partnerships with ODEP and with NOD. And then now this year we've expanded our focus, or I can't even call it a focus anymore, but we've expanded to just include other areas of diversity where we're talking about hiring older populations or groups like LGBTQ issues and talking about having networking calls around that, or continuing with disabilities, continuing with hiring different generations and managing different generations and what that might be like. And then also just always having kind of race and ethnicity on top of mind as well. And then we do have, I should mention that we do have a women in leadership group. So when I talk about DEI, I rarely talk about the women aspect of it, because we have a whole other group who handles that.
Wow. Okay. So there was a lot there. That was
yeah.
really good.
I'm busy.
So, yeah. Well, what I love, and I think will be really valuable example to our audience specifically, is you did a couple things. Like, first, you listened to members, right? So there was an incident, there was a response, like they came to you all, and like, kudos to you for listening, which is awesome. And then step two, you took action without budget. Like most people in this, not most, people in association that say, well, we can't do anything, we don't have the budget for that, and it's just sort of the end. And you found a way to just break through and say, well, we're going to make this happen. So I already know you're a rock star, Haley. The other thing you did was create partnerships. Like, I think this is such an opportunity in our industry, is to, you can't always do everything yourself. You can't always like staff it up. You don't have the budget to, put together this team, but there's awesome people that are wanting and willing to be part of what it is that you're doing, that are willing to get on stage for you and do all these things to actually make your voice. So what has been the response to your members, right? It's come full circle. They spoke to you, you took action. Like, what's been some of that response that you've heard so far?
Sure. So in the beginning, and I'll say it wasn't all of our members, but there's going to be pushback because it's different for some people and it might be uncomfortable for a lot of people. So there's a little bit of pushback and kind of what about us attitude. But I have to say the overall response, I mean, the good certainly outweighs some of the negatives that we get. We turned that council on its head, and we really took them from behind the scenes of what they used to work on with ASA to truly, I mean, to the point where now they're trying to figure out catchy titles to get people to think, oh, what's this about? I mean, we've had 2 of these sessions now, but one in person and one virtual, called Coffee with a Black Guy, where no question is off limits. He gives a 20-minute presentation and then everyone asks questions. And the way that he disarms these people and the candid and uncomfortable things that they share, and sometimes it's personal, sometimes it's work related, but they feel like it's a safe space that they can kind of ask these things and try to learn to be better without feeling judged. My favorite impact that I've seen has been the people who comment on our webinars or networking calls with a lot of these more diverse panels, who say, I feel seen by this, or I've never seen anyone who looks like me talking about this or in this position talking like this, and feeling like they too can aspire to be that, and they have someone to look up to in the industry. There's very few you don't see a lot of minorities in the C-suite position right now, and I think it's something that's going to start changing. And in some cases they're out there, we just might not know about it, but just to kind of put a spotlight on them though, and to show people, we're here. and I've seen kind of offshoot LinkedIn groups and Facebook communities kind of popping up in the last year that are all these different areas of diversity in the staffing industry that are being started by some of our members because they just want to build these connections. So it's been kind of cool to see these almost like an ERG kind of pop up. But yeah, I do think that I think it wasn't easy, and it's definitely gotten easier. Some days are harder than others, but I do think that it's one of those things I think you have to just stay the course and trust that that this is the right thing to do, even if people might disagree in the beginning. But I do think that it's been a huge benefit, and I think it helps a lot of our members kind of see things through a different lens.
Yeah. There's really never anything that you could do other than maybe, cut everybody's dues in half. That's going to make everybody in an association happy. Like that just doesn't happen. Sometimes you're going for a majority. Sometimes you're going for the betterment of the industry, the culture, and everybody. And that is a fight worth fighting, or a battle worth battling, however you want to say that. So what are kind of the next steps? I agree, it's something that you have to push through, and you just have to keep going, and the benefits may not be felt immediately, or maybe some are. I think to your point, like getting people to say, I haven't seen people like me, or I haven't had this conversation, or I felt uncomfortable to have it, or what have you. The fact that we're even talking about it now, right, is sort of getting it out there in a way, which is fantastic. And how long, what are the next steps, and how long before you think we see like tremendous changes?
Yeah, I'd say at least in for the staffing industry, for us, we are some of my goals, are ultimately to, quite frankly, to ultimately have enough buy-in for like a half-day DEI conference of some sort, or even a pre-con. I mentioned earlier, I also oversee our volunteer program. And so, one thing that we have tried to kind of put in our staff liaisons' heads is increasing diversity on those groups, because, that only funnels up to the board ultimately if someone does express interest in eventually getting to the board of directors. Our board of directors has started to become a lot more diverse, which has been nice to see. You have to start somewhere. So I look forward to seeing where it can be, in 5 to 10 years from now, and just seeing just what that makeup looks like visually. I know at a previous job of mine, we had a keynote make a comment about the lack of diversity on the board, and this is in 2012. So cut to last year, I happened to look at their board slate. It's the most diverse board slate I've ever seen. And it was incredible, but it's more of a reflection of their members. And so that's what I would love to see for us too, is that at some point, and not even that it's something that we're actively trying to do, but that it just is inherent and that it just happens. That's kind of my ultimate long-term goal.
Yeah, again, just creating an environment where it's okay, I'll say, to say something. It's always been, it's just more comfortable. That can suddenly bring to light others who also wanted to be a part of that and wanted to say something. And now in this new world of like influencers, you can make that happen in much more expeditious way. You sort of lean on the right levers and utilize the right channels to make this thing happen.
Yeah, I think it's interesting also that where your DEI has become such a big focus for so many different organizations, companies, whatnot, at a time when there's also such a big, broad conversation around what does work look like, what does staffing look like anyway, from a flexibility perspective, from a remote perspective, all these other things. I'm just curious, how much of this is then maybe trickling down into the way in which your member organizations are focusing their DEI efforts within their companies? Are you seeing that they're coming to you saying, hey, can you help us figure out how to implement these types of things within our own organization?
Yeah, so last year we actually did a program, two-part program on how to start a DEI program. We
Okay.
had and it was a panel discussion with someone who we had varying degrees of resources, I'll say, within the panel. So we had someone from a very large company with endless resources. We had someone who was from a really small company who they didn't really have a budget for this, but they started these brown bags on a monthly basis that people could come talk. And then we had kind of everything in between with 5 different people talking, and put out a one-pager to go with it that kind of reflected what you can do and kind of how little you can go versus how big you can go. So we do get a lot of that. I've had several conversations about that. We also, the other interesting thing is because I work with our chapters, they come to us and ask about this too, because their resources are limited. They're typically having, they're an association that's run by one person. So, so, you know, they're trying to figure things out as well. But our members, you know, some of them have truly started things. Or I remember last year when we did that panel discussion on how to start a program, I had a lot of follow-up conversations about, you know, how many people is enough for an internal committee so we can get this going, and just kind of trying to figure out how to get their feet wet and really get the ball moving. We even took a lot of the feedback that we got from it. I mean, the reason it became a 2-part series is because of the amount of feedback we were getting, that we decided, or maybe we should have a second conversation. A lot of the programming that has come since then has been influenced by all of the feedback we've gotten from that. This year, we've kind of turned the programming before, where it's more about like, how do you do all of this? This year, it's the kind of overall theme is to try to address the Great Resignation. So all the resources and programs that we're building kind of can help answer that and address that, and hopefully help people keep their staff, because they're creating these inclusive environments where people want to stay.
Right. That's great.
We didn't ask you this in sort of the pre-meeting, but what would you say is your greatest success from this program so far?
Mine would probably be the it's a toss-up between the National Urban League, probably because that was the very first one, or and it was that one that I was incredibly nervous about doing, because I thought people were going to, I thought it's going to go one of 2 ways, and but it was great. The other one's probably the staffing we did in January of this year. Actually, we did a staffing industry women of color in the C-suite panel, and those comments from that, I think I rode that high for like a week. The women commenting about just feeling seen, and saying, and people who weren't even, you know, the panelists are all women of color. The audience was very diverse, but even people who I knew the names, who might have been not a person of color, but were saying like, we need more conversations like this. I mean, I thought that was incredible. So that one was probably one of my favorites. And even as a person of color myself, like, it was something that I truly could relate to as well, just listening to them talk. So it was pretty awesome.
That's
cool.
awesome. We love it. Well, as usual, I'm the person who has to come in and end such great conversations, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Haley, this was wonderful. I mean, really kudos to you for the work that you've done and how far you've been able to take it in a very short amount of time. I mean, maybe things are ripe right now for the acceptance of these types of programs, but also I think they need strong leaders, and you clearly are one. And we are so blessed to have had you here today to talk about it. And thank you, Alexis, for recommending it. As we always do, we end these shows where we ask if you now have someone in your mind that you think we could benefit from talking to next.
Yes. Okay. I have 2.
Okay. I love it.
One is Camille Sanders. Camille's the Director of Membership and Marketing at the American Association of the Studies of Liver Disease. But
That's
I always say she's, yes, AASLD for short. But I always say she's my membership marketing guru friend. And then we're actually in the same DELP class with ASAE. And then the other is Janice Johnson, who I've known. She and I started at ASHA at the same time back in 2011, and now she's about to be the Chief Engagement Officer at the Council for Exceptional Children.
Very cool.
Great.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait to talk to them and sing your praises as well. And we just, again, really appreciate your time being here. Thank you, Haley. Thank you, Lucas.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Haley. It was a real pleasure. I really enjoyed having the conversation, and wish you the best. I mean, you got a lot of passion about the subject, and I know you're going to take this program to the next level.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.